Welcome back. The last two sessions were about JavaScript and we have seen some examples on where we can use JavaScript to make our code or HTML code dynamic. In this session we will see one more example which will add two numbers. So we will create an HTML page which will accept numbers as input from the user, and when you click on the add button the result will be displayed below. So we need JavaScript for that. So let's see how to create that. So first one is I have already created a template for this HTML file. So let's give a title as JavaScript addition, and let the body tag contains some form because we need to accept input from the user. And to accept the input we need two text boxes. So let's say first number, and then we can put input type is equal to text. We need an ID for this text box and let the ID be FNO, and let's close this input tag and put two line breaks. Okay, and next we can copy this thing so that we can have a second number, another text box with ID SNO, and we'll put a line break. Next we can have a button, input type is equal to button with value add. Okay, so let's see this HTML first. So open the documents, and this one is our code. So if you open this one, you can see first NO, second, there is a spelling mistake there, so we can correct it first. Second number and then add. If I give some numbers here, now nothing will happen. So to happen something, we need to include some JavaScript code. So where we can add the JavaScript code? So far we have added the JavaScript code as a value for the attribute onClick. Okay, so on click of this button we need to do something. We need to add the values entered in the two text boxes. But here the onClick addition work will take 2 or 3 lines of code. So writing those 3 lines of code in a single line will make it very difficult to read. So we can take out our JavaScript code into a separate function and do it in that function. So here just we need to call that function. So first I'll write it down. We need to call a function called add, which will add the numbers. So I have to put the value in quotation. So this won't do anything, but we are calling a function called add. So I have to write that function down below. Okay, so we are going to add that code here. You can write JavaScript code by putting a tag called script, and the closing tag is /script. Okay, previously we didn't use it because our JavaScript code was coming in a single line, and that we can write as the value for the onClick attribute. But here, since the number of lines increased, we can take that 3 lines out to a function separately and then just call that function here. So when you are writing JavaScript code separately, you have to put it in between a script and /script. So the way to create a function in JavaScript is to use the keyword function. Okay, and then name of the function is add, so we have to put that add, and then within curly bracket we have to specify what is the action to be performed when this button is clicked. Now the connection is like this. There is a button with value add. When I click on that button, call this person or call this function add, and what add does is written here. Okay, function add, and you have to write your code here, JavaScript code here. The first step is you need to get the first number. So let's name it as A, say for example A. How to get the value written in the first text box, that we have already seen in the last session as document.getElement by ID. And what is the ID name? ID name is fno, and we need the value inside the text box. So this is our first line to get the first number. Similarly, here A is called a variable. Okay, so we are getting the value from the text box and putting it in a variable called A. Similarly, we can get the second variable B and get the value from the second text box, that is SNO, and store the value in B. Next thing what we have to do is S is equal to A plus B. We will be adding these two numbers and storing it in S. Finally, we have to show the result somewhere. So for displaying the result, we need a paragraph here, P/P, and let's give it an ID as result. Okay, so the result should get this S. So how we can write that? Document.getElement by ID result dot inner HTML is equal to S. So we will get the value from fno, store it in A, get the value from SNO, store it in B, add those two numbers and store it in S, finally store the value of S in the inner HTML portion of the result element. Result is this paragraph. So we have done so many things, and let's save this thing and go to the browser, refresh. Let's try number 12.3, add. Something is coming here, but it is not as we expected. It is adding the numbers side by side, right? If I try 5 and 6, it is showing 5, 6, not 11. So there is something wrong in it. The problem here is that JavaScript will take this value as a string. String means a word or a text in JavaScript. So even if it is a number, JavaScript will think that it is a text or a string. And when you are adding two strings or when you are adding two words, it is like adding side by side. So how to solve this problem? We need to tell JavaScript that this has to be considered as an integer value or a number. And that is done using a function in JavaScript called parseInt. Okay, parseInt, and then put this thing in bracket. So this will take the value, it will be a word or a string. That string will be converted to an integer and store it in A. So similarly, we have to do this for the second value also. Save this thing. That's it. A plus B will do, because now A is an integer, B is an integer plus an integer will be an integer, and that will be stored in S. So hopefully everything should work. Let's try this. 5, 6, and now you are getting 11. 15, 16, you are getting 31. So you have created a program to add two numbers using HTML and JavaScript. So the last 3 sessions we have seen some examples of where we can use JavaScript, and starting from next session onwards we will see more about programming in JavaScript. All these things should be remembered. These examples are explained or shown to get a feeling of what JavaScript can do. These are all very simple examples, but this can be expanded to do almost anything in JavaScript. So we will conclude this session here, and in the next session we will continue with basics of JavaScript and what are the different data types that you can use in JavaScript and so on. Okay, so see you in the next session. Thank you.